Ladies and gentlemen, the Cambridge Center for Palestine Studies is professionally delighted and morally pleased to be holding these interviews with internationally renowned experts and academics about the unfolding situation in Palestine. In this episode, we are really delighted to be hosting the eminent Palestinian diplomat, His Excellency Afif Emile Safieh, where I'm sure we will be furnished with his most recent thoughts about the ongoing situation. Your Excellency, we are delighted to be hosting you, and we would really be pleased to hear your take on the situation now. Today we are the 25th of October 2023, midday, noon UK time, so that everybody knows when it was actually recorded. Please, the mic and screen are yours.
Dr. Makram, I'm very grateful that you have invited me for this encounter and this exchange of opinions. I think that all of us, we have been watching day after day, night after night, the horror on our TV screens taking place in the Gaza Strip. I believe as a Palestinian, today I have to wonder loudly whether our victims are faceless, nameless, fatherless, motherless, childless, worthless, and whether we, the Palestinian people, we are children of a lesser God. I was horrified to see the way Western leaders sheepishly went into a pilgrimage in Israel. Biden, Rishi Sunak from the UK, and Macron yesterday from France. And it was understood by Netanyahu as though it was a green light to go on with his slaughter of the Palestinian population in Gaza. I would like the young President Macron to ask one of his advisors to brief him on the way President de Gaulle used to conduct foreign affairs. De Gaulle in 1967 had an initiative of his own, which he called La Concertation à Quatre, the coordination of the major four powers. Unfortunately, beyond two meetings that took place in New York by the permanent representatives, his initiative did not fly very high, for the simple reason that the USA then was not unhappy with the Israeli victory of '67. It compensated the humiliations of Vietnam. The Soviet Union, short-sighted like they frequently could be, preferred the bipolar constellation and configuration and didn't see why they should give lesser countries like Britain, France equal status. The English were not enthusiastic simply because the initiative was French to begin with. And since then, ladies and gentlemen, we had a durable process instead of a lasting permanent peace. De Gaulle's idea was that those majors would meet, agree on what is doable, desirable, and possible, and signal to the local belligerent parties what the world expects from them. Unfortunately, his idea did not take root, and since then we have had multiple peace processes that ended nowhere, simply because we have witnessed the self-inflicted impotence of the international community vis-à-vis that conflict in the Middle East that kept festering and festering. I was very proud yesterday to hear the Secretary General of the United Nations make the speech he delivered to the Security Council, where he said history did not begin on the 7th of October. The 7th of October did not happen in a vacuum, and he enumerated the gross daily violations and the escalations that the Israeli government inflicted on Palestinian society all throughout the West Bank. Incursions daily into Palestinian cities. Every day we had 2 to 3 fatalities. The incursions into the mosque of Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem in the most provocative manner, attacks against the Christian community, spitting on clergy and believers, etc., etc. So October the 7th did not happen in a vacuum. I personally feel that Jewish communities and Israelis have an important role to play in the coming weeks. I personally believe that a Palestinian state is a right for the Palestinian people, but it's a moral obligation, it's an ethical duty for Jewish communities to help create the Palestinian state, because they, better than anybody else in the world, know the human price, collective and individual, that we have had to pay for Israel to be created. So a Palestinian state is a right for the Palestinians, but it's a moral obligation and an ethical duty for Jews around the world. I'm proud to say that within the American Jewish community, a larger and larger segment of society is expressing themselves, demonstrating in New York and in Washington under the title, "Not in Our Name." I'm proud of their demonstrations, and they save and salvage the future of relations between Christian, Muslims, and Jews around the world. I personally believe that the moral dilemma and the political challenge today is manifest. We either have one people too many in the Middle East, we the Palestinians, or there is a state missing. The internet has given its answer. There is a state which is missing and needs to be created. And I think that unfortunately, history is still undecided, and our task today is to help history make the right choice. I never belonged to the optimistic school of thought that promises victory and salvation to the oppressed. Unfortunately, history is a cemetery for oppressed people who remained oppressed until they vanished into historical oblivion. So I invite you all to make a difference. We should not remain objects of history. We should become subjects of our own history. And I believe our task today is to help history make the right choice. In Israel-Palestine, it's paradoxical that the oppressor hates the victim much more than the victim hates the oppressor. And I believe that today, more than ever, the international community should be visible and vocal in a constructive manner, the way Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, indicated. We should obtain as fast as possible a cessation of the aggression against Gaza. We should, as fast as possible, gain access for the humanitarian aid waiting at the entrance of Rafah and allowed to trickle only, like a drop into an ocean of needs. We should allow more massive international aid and humanitarian aid to reach the population of Gaza. Ladies and gentlemen, I personally believe that the reverberations and the scars resulting from this aggression we will have to live with in the coming years. I believe international law has been violated in the most blatant manner, and it should not go unpunished. Accountability is a principle that we should stick and abide by. International law should be our compass in our behavior and in our beliefs. And I personally believe that we can make a difference. I am in touch with friends across the ocean in America and with people all over continental Europe. I believe that in the USA, which I have always described as a nation of nations, I had hoped that the American administration will be the broker, the honest broker, the even-handed broker. And for years, when America was there in a position of dominant hegemonic superpower, which is no more the case, by the way, I had hoped that America will adopt a policy of non-alignment in regional conflicts. Why? Because as the only remaining superpower then, a few years ago, America, when it allied one party in a regional conflict, for example, Israel, not only did it alienate all the other players in the region, but it also offended, alienated, and ghettoized a domestic player in its own national fabric. It is a nation of nations, America. And believe you me, it was not easy to be a Palestinian American, an Arab American, or a Muslim American. They were being antagonized and marginalized, and they had the feeling that their country of adoption had no sensitivity to the sufferings of their countries of origin. And I believe that Joe Biden today, his policy I can describe as though it is a subcontract in the Israeli strategy. And I believe it will be difficult for Arab Americans and Muslim Americans, and there are 8 million of those, to vote for Joe Biden if he is the candidate for the Democratic Party. I know that might bring back a Republican, maybe Trump, quelle horreur, back to the White House. But I think that if the message is sent today to democratic circles in America, they might think seriously to have another candidate, another democratic candidate for the coming presidential elections, not only for Middle Eastern reasons, but also for health reasons and lucidity, etc. Here in the UK, where I happen to reside, I believe that King Charles had a well-inspired definition of what the UK is. He called it a community of communities, very rightly so. And I believe that the Arab and the Muslim community today feels very offended by the attitudes, the positions taken by the Prime Minister, a conservative, and by the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, on behalf of Labour. And I believe that they would be now extremely inclined, wanting to punish both those parties in the coming elections, which will take place probably in 2024. I believe that many will withdraw their support of the Labour Party. Apparently, more than 70% of the Muslim community in this country usually vote for Labour. They were offended when Tony Blair unnecessarily and illegally went with George Bush in a war against Iraq that has cost over $1 million and damaged the regional structure in the area. And I personally believe that after 13 years of conservative rule, the political pendulum indicates that Labour will be the coming winner, especially that they have had a cascade of conservative prime ministers were not all well inspired or inspiring at all. But yet the Arab and Muslim community in the UK, by withholding their votes from Labour, Labour will be the winner of the coming elections, but they will not be having a majority in parliament and will be forced and resigned to having a coalition partner, the Liberal Democrats. And I believe that the Arab and the Muslim community from today will be telling both the Liberal Democrats and the Green Party that many votes will go to both those parties in the coming elections, which were not accustomed to go in that direction. And it is thanks to the Arab and to the Muslim vote that tomorrow Britain might have a coalition government with the liberals as the junior partner. We can make a difference, and that's the only way that the traditional mainstream parties will understand the political weight and the electoral significance of communities that are part of the national fabric and cannot be offended with no accountability from now on. I believe in France also, the Muslim vote is important. You know, in Europe today, multiculturalism is a concept that one has to meditate and think about. And I believe multiculturalism is a window of opportunity because it allows minority communities to do two things that were seen in the past as incompatible and irreconcilable. Today, a minority individual can further one's integration while preserving one's identity. Identity and integration are no more irreconcilable, but au contraire, they can go hand in hand. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that we are all extremely angry, but we should channel that anger into constructive political strategic thinking. We need cohesion, and cohesion was not always what characterized and described us. We need cohesion. We need to be more vocal, more visible, and very constructive in engaging in dialogue with as many institutions as possible in this country, while strengthening the existing institutions that we already have, which all need a lot of improvement. I remember what Helmut Schmidt, Prime Minister of Germany, used to say: the biggest room on earth is the room for improvement. And I believe we should strengthen, deepen, and broaden the institutions we already have. I happen to be a Christian, and I always used to say, Palestine, even in the bleakest of moments, I remained confident that Palestine will resurrect. And as you know, we in Jerusalem, we in Palestine, we have had some previous experience in resurrection. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Afif Emile Safieh. May I kindly just ask you if you have mentioned that both the states, EU, are both partial brokers rather than impartial brokers. Who can play this role then?
I personally believe that the UN should play a role, and I'm happy that the Secretary General of the UN yesterday remembered and reminded the world that he is there representing the international community as a whole. I believe that the UN should be a structure that plays an enormous role, giving guidance to the local belligerent parties of what the world expects from them. Besides that, I believe that we should activate the South to play the role that they are owed by the international community. And in the South, we can have Brazil from Latin America, South Africa from the African continent, and maybe Indonesia playing a major triangular role, tri-continent of the South. So we need to have additional players, more active, more vocal, and we have to interact with them. And we have to have the UN as principles guiding our pursuits, but also as an institution through which we can channel our aspirations and conduct our discussions and dialogues. The Palestinians and the Israelis should not be left the way the diplomatic liturgy used to go in the previous years. We encourage you to go towards direct negotiations because of the asymmetry of power. The asymmetry of power is such that pushing us again and again towards direct negotiations allows the Israeli to believe that they can set the ceiling of the possible and the permissible and the pace of progress, if any. So I believe peace is too important to be left to the Israelis to decide upon. You are an expert in Israeli domestic politics. The Israelis had the impression that they can decide what percentage of occupied territory they will be willing to concede. Well, it's not up to them. And they had the feeling that if they voted Labour, they can give back 80%. If they voted Likud, they can give 30%. And it's not up to them to decide. There is international law. An occupied territory is an occupied territory that has to be relinquished. And we should not forget that we have the Arab peace plan that even the Security Council has welcomed and applauded. And the Arab peace plan is the following. If you Israelis withdraw out of the occupied territory in 1967, you will obtain acceptance and recognition from the region. And now the Israelis, because of Trump and his blunders, and having succeeded in normalizing relations with two minor states like Bahrain and the Emirates, they believed that they can overjump the Palestinian factor. No, I believe that Israelis will be well aware today that we, the Palestinians, are the key for their regional acceptance, no other. We, the Palestinians, are the key for their regional acceptance, and they can forget about Biden's attempt to normalize Saudi-Israeli relations. The Saudi Arabian leadership will be well aware of the temperature of Saudi public opinion, and with the aspiration in Saudi Arabia to play a leading role in the Arab Muslim world today, they know that they have to stick to principles that are very well rooted in the Arab world, in the Muslim world, and in the third world, which is the right of Palestinians to self-determination and statehood. Well, I believe that we can make a difference, and I believe that the Arab peace plan is still on the table. We, the Palestinians, we have been unreasonably reasonable. We have accepted the two-state solution, which was not our preferred option. It was the international consensus that led us into accepting what the international community considered desirable, the two-state solution. So it's we who aligned ourselves on the international consensus and not the international community which aligned itself on our preference. We were unreasonably reasonable. And what has happened in the last 30 years of a theoretical peace-making process was the following. Dr. Makram, I believe you will agree with me that what we have witnessed during those 30 years was not an Israeli withdrawal, but an Israeli expansion into the occupied territories through the elastic growth of the illegal settlements. What was the constant in Israeli politics, whatever the nature and the coloration of the coalition in power, is that they wanted as much of Palestinian geography as possible with as little of this unacceptable, not only by Palestinian or Arab standards, but by the international standards. Today, we should not allow them to get away with it. You know, in the past, some commentators, each time Israeli behavior exceeded what was tolerable, people would say, oh, this time it has shot its foot. And my comment then was to say, it seems to me Israel has many more than 2 feet to shoot at because they keep getting away with it. Not this time.
My question is, in this case, assuming a ceasefire will take place sooner rather than later, what sort of steps could be taken in order to go back to the diplomatic track?
Well, I believe there should be an internal intra-Palestinian dialogue, which is not unfortunately taking place, on how this crisis, this tragedy, we should turn into an opportunity. For example, we have suffered of a fracture in the Palestinian political system. Both wings of the Palestinian territory, Gaza and the West Bank, went in separate ways. We have to repair the Palestinian political system, and I believe that we should have a national coalition government as soon as possible. And I believe that we should not allow Israel to dictate who should govern Gaza in the future, because that's their appetite and that's their ambition to impose on us if it suits them. This is why I would like to have us, we the Palestinians, preemptively and preventively open a dialogue and fast, because time, we often neglect the importance of the factor of time. We should engage in an internal dialogue and find new structures and a willingness and a path towards the reunification of the Palestinian political system and the two wings of the Palestinian entity that was emerging and is still emerging post-Oslo. So I welcome partnership between all the factions, and I believe that we can turn this tragedy into a window of opportunity. And nobody should say there is no Palestinian interlocutor. There is the PLO, that is the recognized international interlocutor. And if I were a Hamas member today, and I have always been very open-minded towards Hamas, even though I have no ideological affinity with them, I would take the initiative of changing the nature of the governing body in Gaza by inviting an independent personality to lead the board of governance in Gaza and opening it up to all the Palestinian factions presided over by an independent. And I hope it would be a Hamasi. And this would open the way in Ramallah to create a national unity government and the two sides coordinating their approach and becoming the only interlocutor and not leaving to Israel the capacity of inflicting and imposing to us structures that suits them best and are not at all convenient to our aspirations. So an internal domestic Palestinian initiative would be most welcome. I lost you.
Yeah, having spoken about the internal politics, internal Palestinian politics, could you please just move to the regional arena? Do you see any political players who can be influential in this way or another, whether it's with regards to a ceasefire or a political solution?
Let me tell you, Dr. Makram, I was distressed politically, diplomatically for the last 40 years. And I believe the October War of 1973 was the turning point in regional politics and in strategic thinking. After that initiative, Kissinger machiavellically succeeded in disrupting all Arab coordination between the two fronts, Egypt and Syria, then the convergence between the military front with the oil producing countries. I personally, and during that period, post-73, the Arab declined as an international player. And in the Middle East, unfortunately, we saw the emergence of three players and none was Arab. The three regional players became Israel, Turkey, and Iran. I today see that what is needed in the Arab world is the reinvigoration and the resurrection of the Arab League and a rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Egypt. And I believe the Gulf countries and mainly Saudi Arabia should help Egypt stand on its feet and not remain curbed and kneeling because of its financial burdens and demographic burden. And Egypt, if strengthened in that way through cooperation with Saudi Arabia and the Gulf, can become the deterrent for the Gulf area vis-a-vis any territorial appetite or otherwise by Iran. The Gulf doesn't need American protection, doesn't need those guarantees that are worthless and are decided by the American national interest and not by Arab national interest. We should find Arab solution to the threats and opportunities. And I believe tomorrow, we, the Palestinians, but others, should be working for a rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Egypt. And we have to reinvigorate the Arab League, the Arab Defense Pact, and South-South commerce. And I think all those indications are taking place. China has discovered the Middle East recently, and the Middle East has discovered China as in the last few years. And I believe we should intensify South-South relations. And I believe the Arab world will be maturing fast thanks to that horrible war that we have witnessed day after day on our TV stations. We need more maturity, we need more cohesion in the Arab world. And I believe we all became aware of the absence of Arab players on the international arena. It was good yesterday to see several Arab foreign ministers in the Security Council. I think that consultation, coordination should be improved between all the Arab players. And I remain hopeful. I always say it's optimists who make history, not pessimists. And I was always saddened that in Palestinian society, many among us had elevated pessimism as though it was the criteria of measurement of one's patriotism. No, optimism makes history, and history is always in the making. The question is, will we remain objects of history, or will we become subjects of our own history? I believe the challenge that we are all facing today is an opportunity, and we all have become aware of the need of improving inter-Arab relations. By the way, you are an expert in Israeli policies. It has been known that for the last few years, the Israelis created a variety of social fictitious social media vehicles to create disputes in the Arab world among societies. They have posts that have specialized in creating tensions and insults between Gulf and Palestinians, etc., etc. And they have, in a way, helped create vertical and horizontal divisions, etc. So we, the Arabs, should be aware that we are a society that is easy to infiltrate. We should become immune to those infiltrations by the Israelis. And Arab cohesion is a necessity for the coming years and decades.
Moving to the international arena and combining this with pessimism, optimism, many Arabs and Palestinians say it doesn't matter if you change or replace the candidate, whether it's Biden or Trump or someone else, as long as the administration is actually in the hands or under the influence of the Israel lobby. Similarly, the case is in the UK and the EU. Any idea how you can change this?
Well, in matters of minority communities, one has to give time to time. And I believe there are many novelties that have taken place. Take in the States, for example, there was a new generation of Arab and Muslim candidates who succeeded to become congresswomen. I believe that on the municipal and state-by-state elections, many Arab Americans succeeded in getting elected. I believe that we should target to knock down candidates who are hostile to our aspirations, and we should help promote candidates who are sensitive to our rights. And our communities should get more involved. For example, we should encourage in America senators and congressmen and women to have congressional aides of the Arab American community. You can't imagine the influence and the importance of congressional aides in drafting letters, in speech writing for the employer, etc., etc. And all this is an exercise and a training for future candidates. A candidate starts by being a congressional assistant, gets whets his appetite or her appetite in politics, becomes more familiar with the political game, and so there are improvements in the US political system. It's slow. It's much slower than. Now, the lobby is also challenged now, and among others from within the American Jewish community, which I see as a very important factor. And there are alliances taking place between the Palestinian community and their leadership and those Jewish movements that demonstrated in the streets of New York and on Capitol Hill by saying not in our name. But we should accelerate this process of maturation and integration. In the UK, I think that we, the Arabs, are the only unrepresented community in the House of Lords. And it's the Arab community that should start propelling a few of their members to be nominated, because the House of Lords, it's by nomination. And it's easier to become a member of the House of Lords by nomination by the major political parties rather than to get elected in the House of Commons. But also here in the UK, I would like to see the phenomenon of encouraging Arabs and to become assistants and aides to the members of parliament. And all this training, the cumulative effect of all this training will produce for us future candidates in municipal elections and beyond. It's a slow process, it's a gradual process. We have to take care of those and play the role of the catalyst. For example, our Arab community is still underrepresented in the media. And I think we should find ways of encouraging the second and third generation of Arab Britishers to do media studies and move towards either the TV or audio or the written media. Unfortunately, many intellectuals in the Arab community in previous decades, whenever they wanted to ventilate their annoyance, since London was the capital of the Arab media, they would think of writing an article for Al-Hayat or Sharq al-Awsat or Al-Quds al-Arabi. But that's a castrating phenomenon. You ventilate your annoyance by writing an article in Arabic for an Arab readership. No, we don't have Arab Britishers who are writers in The Guardian and the Financial Times and the Telegraph and the Times, etc. We should encourage that phenomenon. I don't see them on the, for example, the Black British community has been by far more successful. The Muslim community as a whole is making some breakthroughs, but the Arab British community is still lagging behind. We should find a way of catalyzing this integration.
Your Excellency, you have served in the Vatican, the Holy See, in London, in Washington, and in Moscow. I haven't heard you mentioning Moscow, Russia, if it's got any role to play at all.
I have deliberately avoided of mentioning Moscow, because whoever mentions Moscow has to think of Ukraine, and it's a complicating factor. For example, one of the casualties of the Ukraine war has been that the quartet, which was totally inefficient, because the quartet was a one-tet operation monopolized by the Americans. But as a result of the war in Ukraine, the quartet ceased to be existing, and this multilateral forum for consultation, even though it played no significant role in the past, died. This is why we have to resurrect the Security Council of the UN and to resurrect major players from the third world like Brazil and South Africa, etc. So I deliberately avoided tackling Russia. But Russia remains a permanent member of the Security Council. It has shaken the previous international system, which was monopolar. Today, people describe the international system as multipolar, something that I welcome, with Russia as another pole, China as an important rising third pole, and the EU, unfortunately, since it's expanded to the 27 countries, has lost its cohesion and has not played a role. I often joke with the Europeans by saying, you are still, as the European Union, an actor in search for a role. We in the Middle East, we have a role in search for an actor. If we could merge the two, we will all live less unhappily ever after. But unfortunately, the European Union today is a big mess, and it's presided over by this lady who has been atrocious with her positions. The UK with Brexit. You know, in the UK, Dr. Makram, there was always the discussion, is the UK boxing beyond its weight or beneath its weight? Is it still boxing? I don't think that Britain is influential in international relations. But I hope that the Arab world will emerge as a fifth or sixth pole in a multipolar world. It's up to us to decide whether we want to be a sixth pole in the international system or not. And a multipolar world is much more comfortable than a unipolar, monopolar world, which belongs now to the past.
We shall indeed neglect the Russia-NATO-Ukraine war cause. However, many in the world have been saying that if the NATO circle considers Russia as an occupying force in Ukraine, why can't the same NATO consider Israel as an occupying power in Palestine? And they introduced the double standard terminology. Have you got any take on this, please?
No, I fully agree with your observation that the war in Ukraine has shown and demonstrated beyond any doubt the hypocrisy of the international system and the international relations and commentators around the world. This is why I started my talk with you by saying we are not children of a lesser God, and our victims are not faceless, motherless, nameless, childless, worthless. Yes, the Ukraine war has shown the double standard of the West. And I believe that Biden, Rishi Sunak, and Macron have been beneath contempt, and I say it with great clarity. And this is why I said that they should be accountable, and I use the word they need to be punished. And I would like to conclude with this word.
You're right to we will finish with the following question, perhaps. Having mentioned God and other lesser people, it seems, you served in the Vatican. Don't you think that the Pope has a role to play?
Yes, and I think that in his usual way, he has indicated that he is extremely unhappy, one, about the mistreatment of the Palestinian people and of the Christian community in Palestine. And he has been in touch with Joe Biden apparently for 20 minutes 3 days ago, lobbying for the immediate cessation of hostilities, which Biden is not yet accepting. Unfortunately, the Archbishop of Canterbury had a visit of his own, which I do not agree with. He started by saying that accusing Israel of having bombarded the hospital is comparable to the blood libel anti-Semitic trope. And I don't know why he said that. I was offended by it. And he tried to rectify by expressing some regret in an interview he made with one newspaper. But the blunder was there, and it created great discontent among the Anglican community of Palestine. The damage and the casualties in the Christian hospital of Gaza, which is servicing society as a whole, could not be but an Israeli bomb. We all have seen the Hamas rockets, the little damage when they reach a destination, they do, that it would have been incapable of doing the damage that has done. And it wasn't Pakistan bombing Gaza, it was Israeli aviation and artillery that were bombing. So he trying to absolve Israel from responsibility in a damaging raid that cost in one shot 471 fatalities was very unhelpful. So the Archbishop of Canterbury has a lot of penitence to make to be absolved by God for the sin of having protected, defended Israel when, on the contrary, he should have considered it to be accountable. So unfortunately, as a Christian, and I know you too happen to be a Christian, that statement of his was surely not inspired by the Holy Spirit. That's the most I can say for now.
Ambassador Afif Emile Safieh, many thanks for being with us. It's been a great pleasure having you here as usual, listening to your magnificent input and whilst you have shed light on so many topics. I'm sure that we will be having with you another episode very soon when things at least get slightly more clear. Many thanks and best wishes. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.